and welcome to episode 59 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Tonight I'm going to be talking about Mr. Pook's kitchen. Let me just flick back over to here and yes. So Mr. Pook's is a restaurant nearly as close as you can get. I mean, he's literally 3 doors down the road from where I live. And I did a photo shoot for him a couple of years ago. And he's been closed down for the last few months and the latest bit of lockdown, but is reopening tomorrow night. So it seemed like a good time to have a little chat about the photo shoot we did. Also this evening on for the critique section, I'm going to be looking at Robert put in this picture of sky, water tower, fields, and he's wanting to get a little bit more feedback on what else he might have done with it. Quinton put in a photo of a bird in a field, converted to black and white, was wanting to know what other options he might have had. Roy was busy with a warhorse sculpture and these wire sculptures of World War I infantrymen, and was wondering how to kind of get it so that these could stand out a little bit better in the photo. And VG has been getting very creative while suffering from cabin fever in lockdown, has realised the only way she can photograph anything is if she makes something herself to have in, to photograph. So we're going to be looking at that as well. So here we are on Facebook Live. Welcome. Leave me a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. And yeah. If the alternatively, if you're watching this on the YouTube recording, then up here, youtube.com/Kim Ayres, I record these as they go out live on Facebook and then put them onto YouTube the following day. So usually on a Wednesday afternoon, you can find the recorded version. And if you go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres, please do subscribe. But you will also find the previous 58 episodes along with a handful of other things. I also write a blog post each Wednesday morning, and so you will find, once I've uploaded this to YouTube, I then embed it into the blog post. So again, usually by about Wednesday afternoon, if you go to kimayres.blogspot.com, you will find the blog post. The blog posts are sometimes related to the podcasts. Well, usually, occasionally they tend to sort of stray off on so much of a tangent. Yeah, the connection's a little bit tenuous. But to be honest, it's more, the blog is as much an exploration of my mental health as anything else. It's just where I write my thoughts. Like I say, sometimes related to how I felt the podcast went the night before. I'm feeling just sort of slightly behind catching up here because, to be honest, I turned on all the programs and everything, and suddenly OBS, which is the software I use in order to be able to talk to you and then stream it and record it and all the rest of it, decided that it wasn't playing properly. The webcam vanished, there was no sound going on. Last time the sound vanished, the last 2 times the sound vanished was due to a Microsoft update, and when I sort of set it going, it made my voice high and squeaky. So with no sound, I went in and changed it all. So hopefully my voice isn't all high and squeaky this time. Right, with that lot out of the way, I can see I've got a few comments in already. So let's go and see who's saying hello. So Maggie is saying hello everyone from a sunny evening in Castle Douglas. That's my wife. She's sitting in the kitchen next door monitoring this, and she was going to let me know if my voice was all high and squeaky. So either she's just having a laugh about the fact that it is and she's not going to tell me, or I'm out or I don't have any problems in that area tonight. Jim says good evening all from Dumfries. Brian from Dumfries also, hi Kim, good to be with you and all who are watching in. Rosie says hello Kim and everyone from a beautiful Isle of Whithorn. VG's here from India saying good evening. Jackie says evening everyone from South Africa. Nuria is saying good evening everyone. Ben is saying hello all from Edinburgh. Stacey is saying good afternoon on this warm 80-degree Tuesday. And that's in Pennsylvania. Pat is saying hi all from a not so sunny Minehead in southern England. Roy is saying hello everyone from West Yorkshire, watching this on my new super duper monitor. Well, I'm glad you managed to get that one, Roy. last week or the week before, I think it was, Roy put into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group about the fact that he was looking for a monitor and looking for advice. Fortunately, I don't think anybody managed to give him any advice other than Google it. Anyway, so he's now got a new monitor all set up, so that's great. You can now watch us in high definition. Morven says hello from Dumfries. And Pat says, you do realise the wee mannequin changes position when you're not looking. Yeah. You know, I have wondered. Each week for the last, I don't know, few months, I've changed the position of the mannequin. Yes, the little drawing thing here on just behind over my shoulder, and I've wondered whether anybody would ever notice. And so far, nobody has commented except Pat now. So extra smug points to you, Pat, for being the first one to actually notice and comment on it. Now, of course, the rest of you are all going to say, "Oh yeah, I noticed that," but you didn't comment about it. So well done, Pat. Becca says, good evening, everyone. Oh, Morven's saying she noticed it. Yes, easy to say you noticed it after Pat said. And right, okay, cool. So we've got a few people in tonight, and right, okay. So what are we going to do? Yeah. Mr. Pook's. So Mr. Pook's Kitchen. Mr. Pook's Kitchen opened up 3 years ago, and it's unlike any of the other restaurants in Castle Douglas. It's very much. He's very much a well. One of the things I found interesting straight away was that outside the door, at the gate, the entrance on the wall, there's a sample menu, and it's a sample menu. It's not an actual menu of what you can definitely go in and find to eat in there tonight. What it gives is an idea of the kind of things you might find. And the reason he doesn't have a fixed menu is because the menu is based on local produce, whatever he's managed to source from his local suppliers, or even gone foraging around the Galloway landscape or coastal areas. And so, depending on what he's got in, it's local, it's as fresh as it can be, it's the highest quality, and then from that, the menu is decided. So it's and the whole thing about Mr. Pook's is it's as much about the experience of the food as much as the food itself. So it's not just the taste; it's the textures, it's the visual side of it. You get the it's not like I'm just nipping out for a burger. If he does do a burger, it's going to be an amazing burger. And it's not going to be like one of these chains. And it's not a kind of standard thing where you've got, that we all know the kind where you've got a fixed menu with 400 items on it, and you've got your Tex-Mex and you've got your different pizzas and that, and everything is basically pre-cooked or frozen or whatever and just heated up. This is a very different kind of thing. This is food experience. So they've been open for about a year or so, and then, sort of just getting themselves up and running, and decided that they really wanted to get some photography done. One of their suppliers is Earth's Crust Bakery. So for some of you who've been watching these podcasts for a while, it's several months, I can't remember exactly when, probably back in the autumn, I talked about the photo shoot I did with Earth's Crust Bakery. And they really love the photos I did for them. So we got together, had a meet up to sort of talk about the kind of photography that we might want to do. And we were sitting in the corner of the restaurant, and sort of looking back and sort of drinking super strong, beautiful, wonderful coffee, coming up, getting caffeinated, getting excited about possibilities and ideas. And we were talking about the idea of a signature photo. And that signature photo, the signature photo is the one that's essentially, it's a bit like your album cover or your book cover or your website header. It's the image which sets the scene. It's the image whereby when people, it's the first one they see, and from that, it gives them the framework with which to judge everything else that comes along. So if you look at a book cover and you see a picture of a spaceship landing on Earth, you kind of get a sense of what the story is going to be about. Or if you see an album cover of a young kid with an acoustic guitar, you know again the kind of music that you're expecting to have from that. So the way we were sort of looking back into the restaurant, we started to say, well, okay, what if we had Ed Pook in the foreground? We had the waitresses and visitors and customers and what have you in the midground, and in the background you've got this sort of open kitchen part and the bar, and you could have all that, and it's sort of 3 layers going back, and it all sounded rather wonderful. And let's just and this so this was pretty much the picture we ended up with, or rather this is the photo we ended up with, and it sounded great. But then there comes this point of sort of afterwards you leave and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to do it? Because it's very layered, and the natural lighting doesn't really look like this. The natural lighting wasn't going to give the very distinctive layers that I wanted. I'll talk through how I did this one in a minute. I mean, the other part of this shoot was about the fact that it was really about creating a kind of an image bank as well. It wasn't just getting one photo. What they wanted was a whole set of photos. So you would be, so you wanted action photos, you wanted chef at work, you wanted waitresses at work, you wanted customers being served, you wanted food close-ups, you wanted stuff being plated up, sort of food being enjoyed, food sitting out there, everything to kind of give you this feel of what you could expect if you went to Mr. Pook's restaurant. And it's something I've found that I've been doing increasingly more of over the years. Up until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, I've been doing the portraits, and then I was doing the kind of the big standalone images, strong narrative photos, which I really enjoy doing. But I started getting into kind of creating a whole set of images for businesses. And the advantage then is to create a set of images which are all magazine quality. And at that point, if they're putting out an advert, if they're putting stuff onto the website, if they're wanting to create posters, depending on what the main story is, what's going out at that time, they've got a selection of good quality images ready to go. It also means that if there's press release, or a magazine or a newspaper is wanting to run an article about them, they've already got a good set of images ready to go. And that also makes it much easier to quite often get your stuff publicised. If a magazine knows that there's already a good set of photos ready to go, it's much easier for them, rather than if they've then got to find a photographer, send them out, do all that kind of stuff already. So you're halfway there to getting your stuff into the press where you want it, if you've already got good photos to go with it. So that was kind of the idea. I'll show you some of the other photos we took. It was just kind of fun. And so you've got things like, where you have, so here we've got lunch ready to go, lovely bowl of soup and toasties and handmade crisps and stuff with, so you can have wine, and so with those kind of things. We also wanted to have people eating in the restaurant. Ed himself, he quite often comes out and chats to the clients, and it's a very kind of personable experience. Also did a portrait of him, just to make sure that good, nice strong black and white photo. Action photos. Got to have, if you're going to have a chef in there, you've got to have flames in there somewhere. It wouldn't be the same if you didn't have flames coming up. Plating up, that is, you create the food, but then you've got to make sure that the food looks good, and there's a delicacy, there's a construction that goes with it, which is really a lot of fun. And in fact, what I think I'll do, I've got a little behind the scenes video. So this, it's less than 2 minutes, but it will give you a sense of the kind of thing, what happened with the photo shoot. So pause that a sec, because that's come up on the wrong screen. So let's drag that over here, put that there, and then press play. So that music's a bit loud there. I'll just turn that down so it's in the background. So we've got plating up. Yeah, here's me taking a photo of the logo out the front of the door. Getting it set up, you know, you have to make the photos look like they're natural, but it's a very unnatural process to make them look natural. So that, you know, you lighting system set up, because the natural light is never quite strong enough. You want the light to fall where you want it to go, so you can control the mood and feel of it. Grab an assistant to hold a flash for you. And you can see here that I've got the camera is tethered up to a tablet, so when I take the photos, everybody can see what's going on, and so we can discuss what are the important parts that need to be captured. Because it's not just about creating interesting photos that are going to impress the customers. You also need to have photos whereby other people in the restaurant business aren't going to go, oh, why is he doing that? That's a bit naff. You've got to, so things that might look fine to me could involve real, you know, things which don't look good to somebody in the industry. So you have to make sure that somebody else is keeping an eye on what you're photographing, so they can say, no, you wouldn't do it from that angle, you need to include this, or let's move that. So these kind of shoots are very, very much a collaboration. I don't just go in and take photos. I'm constantly working with the client the entire time to make sure we're getting the shot that we want. And here you can see this is where we're sort of then doing that signature photo, creating the layers of light as they go back and getting the flames coming up in the background. So that then that hopefully gives you an idea of the kind of thing we were up to. So if you come back to this photo, just to kind of talk you through then the layers, that we've got 3 distinct layers going back. So we've got Ed standing here in the front, commanding position. This is his restaurant, this is his baby, this is what it's all about. And it's not some generic name, it's not Castle Douglas Eatery or anything like that. It is his name above the door. It is all about his reputation with the food. So he needs to be there at the front. Then you need to have the fact that there's a populated restaurant. And of course, I couldn't do this in the middle of an ordinary, you know, people go there, they pay to eat and have the experience. They don't pay to have lights being put up and a photographer charging about all over the place. So what we did was, Mr. Pook's was always closed on a Sunday and Monday. So we used the Monday. He invited along friends, suppliers, valued clients, and we set up. I did the other shots first, but for this one, you know, they came round. He gave them food, although they weren't allowed to touch it until I photographed them and got the photos I wanted. But anyway, basically everybody had a chance to eat and in return, you know, be a part of, in return for being part of the photo shoot. So there was quite a lot of, right, okay, move to the left, move to the right. But then I had to do the lighting setup for those. So for those of you who are interested in the lighting, there are multiple lights kicking about all over the place, because this is the bit whereby, like I say, when we were sitting in the corner of the restaurant looking back, and I could go, oh, great, have Ed sit leaning against a table here, have the waitress serving somebody behind them, let's have the kitchen in the background. Ooh, if we could get flames going up at the same time, that would be really cool, and that all sounds fantastic. How do you set up the lights like that? Because this lighting isn't really the natural lighting that you would see. So the first thing I've got, you might have noticed, some of you might have noticed in the video, was I've got a great big gridded softbox, and this is sitting just up to the right, in front of where Ed is standing. So if you look at the way the light is falling on his face, on the right side of his face, and essentially move back from that, that's where I've got the main light hitting Ed here. Now the lighting in the kitchen part was sort of being blown out by the flashes, so it looked a bit too dark in there. So what I did was I actually stuck a flash, it might have been 2 even, just down behind the serving area, and pointed. The great thing about the kitchen is it's all stainless steel, so when those went off, it just lit up that entire area. So the light is bouncing around inside there, which is creating a great light, which is then part of that is shooting across to the bar as well, and catching the edge of the face of the woman over here. Then over in this corner, just around the corner on the right, you can see this sort of blue glow that's kind of coming in. And basically in that corner, the wall is painted blue. And I stuck a flash pointing at the wall so that it bounced off the wall and cast this kind of blue sheen that was kind of coming back the way. And then finally, the other light source that you notice is the fact that everybody on the left of the picture here is sort of lit up yellow. We've got the edge of Ed's face here. You can see the edge of his Chef's White's. You can see her face. You see the back of Kenny's head over here. And it looks like they're all being lit up by the flames. Sorry, hang on a sec. They look like they're all being lit up by the flames here, but they're not. In essence, what I needed to... The flames themselves weren't bright enough to create that amount of light. So what I've done is just literally outside the edge of the photo, I've set up another flash which has got a yellow gel on it. And because that's coming from kind of the same direction, you just automatically assume that everybody's being lit by that. And then there was this photo, which you just saw a flash of there. No, not that one. That was... No, so going the wrong way. There, this one. This is one where a couple of the flashes didn't go off. So the flash inside the kitchen area didn't go off. So you can see how much darker it is. This was pretty much one of the test shots where we were playing around. So we've got the main light lighting up Ed has gone off. The orange flash just outside the picture has gone off, and none of the others have. So I was testing the light system here, but it looks for all the world like everybody's sort of lit up just by the flames over there. And for those of you who've watched some of the older programs where I've talked quite a lot about the notion of using artificial light to emulate natural light, that trick of just having the colour, the kind of light you want just outside the edge of the image is one of those that I use quite a lot, and you'll find most photographers who do a lot of complex lighting do that kind of thing. Because very rarely does the natural light ever actually really give you enough light for the kind of thing you want. If I was using natural light, it would be so dark I would have to be really boosting the ISO to get what I wanted, at which point it would be noisy and grainy and the quality just wouldn't be there. But these photos needed to be good enough quality such that if they were to appear in a nice glossy magazine, they would stand their own. They would stand up to it. And in fact they did, because we then ended up, they took out a fantastic DG Life article, 2-page article here, where we've got talking about the behind the scenes of Mr. Pook's restaurant, and also the photo shoot that went on with it. And you can kind of see some of the photos. So this is the corner I'm standing in, shooting back through the restaurant. You can just see in where I'm tethered up to the tablet here. You can see there's Ed there with the kitchen behind. Or this one here where I was taking photos of people sitting enjoying their meal. But you can see I've got this great big soft box on a boom arm sitting right above them in order to make sure everybody was lit up in the way that we wanted. Well, this one was when we were sort of doing the lunch scene. Got a couple of people setting up the table, and here's that big soft box again, which has got a grid on it, which allows me to make the little bit more directional with the light, so it doesn't sort of spill out in other places where I'm not really wanting it. So that gives you an idea of what we were up to. A lot of fun, great shoot, and there's. And just to say again that Mr. Pook's opens again tomorrow night. That's Wednesday, 19th of May, 2021, depending on how far, if you are watching the recordings, how far in the future you've come back to watch this. So yeah, there's quite a few people in and around Castle Douglas who've been waiting and hoping that for him to reopen for that. So hope you found that interesting. Right, okay, I'll just close down a couple of these photos here. If you've got any questions, let me know. So, what have we got? Oh, I've got a few comments in here. Oh, Robert's come in. Howdy all from Texas. Rosie says, is Mr. Pook's kitchen in the old bank building? That's right, yes, because a couple of doors down from me, it used to be the Clydesdale Bank, which is this lovely old stone building, 150 years old, or give or take. And the bank itself only closed down about 4 years ago, and Mr. Pook's took it over and turned it into the restaurant. So yes, Rosie, that's right. Stacey says she likes old style country restaurants. Sandra's here. Hello everyone. Pat says she likes the look of Mr. Pook. He's got panache. Sandra says it's making me hungry looking at all the lovely food. Yeah, it was another one where there was just sort of so much food about, and I wasn't allowed to touch any of it because I was either photographing the food or I was photographing other people eating the food. VG says so many details, amazing, especially after noticed the layers. Naria says, I like the fact you can even see the fire in the background. Yeah, that was a part of it. Part of the thing was, you wanted to have that sense of the kitchen in the back. And if you just have the chefs there, you might notice them eventually, but because you've got this little burst of flame, it does grab the eye and draw you back through the picture, because it was an important part of that. Let's just flip that back over again, just to let you, because yes, you've got Ed here at the front, but you want to be drawn into the photo. You need to be drawn back through the layers, and a nice burst of flame over on the left really helps that. Another thing I would say with this is compositionally, Ed's sitting there in the middle. It's not fully balanced just as it is, and that's because what we notice is there's kind of a bit of a gap down on the right hand side, but it was designed this way so that if you wanted, this is where you could stick a logo, this is where you could stick interesting information without it necessarily if you've got a chunk of writing, you don't want to be having it over in the left hand side here. You want to have it over on the lower right, so you can still get the whole picture. There's also the fact that depending on where this was going to appear, it might end up being much more of a kind of a banner shot, in which case you could sort of stick it in like that, or it might be square, in which case you're chopping parts of it off. And in a way, this photo is the kind of the larger version where you don't necessarily have the best crop. It's very rarely ever going to be seen exactly like this. It's really much more likely to be seen cropped up depending on how it's going to be used. There might be vertical, it might be square, there might be banner versions of it. So you need to design the photo in a way that has maximum flexibility for the way that it's going to be used. Right, what else have we got? Sandra says, such a natural looking photo considering how staged it was. I'm glad you think so, Sandra, because that's really what it was about. You need to kind of make it look natural, even though it's staged. The more natural it looks, the easier it is on the eye. And I mean, a lot of my photos are stage photos where they are staged, but there's still that kind of tableau level to it. You need to have a kind of a convincing narrative. That's really what it's about, I suppose, is the idea of a convincing narrative. Each of the aspects of the photo needs to work with all the other aspects of the photo, because if they jar, if they clash, the photo just doesn't work. So hope you found that interesting, and if you happen to be in Castle Douglas from tomorrow night onwards, do pop into Mr. Pook's, or actually probably need to make an appointment now, I would think, but yeah, well worth the visit. Right, okay, so what have we got then? So and Jackie says, good luck on the opening evening, Mr. Pook. Cool. Okay, so let me just take a quick look over here, and right, so what are we going to do now? Right, little quick thing then. If you are finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com is the place to go. It's not compulsory, but it is always appreciated. So I know quite a few people like to support the podcast, and occasionally people sort of say, well, how can I do that? And buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is certainly the place you can do that. Okay, so Oh, Robert's saying I will book a reservation, but getting over from Texas for it. I need to book it for next year, Robert. Um, so now we're going to move on to the critique section. So this is your opportunity to put your photo in for feedback and critique. Most of the time we take photos, we don't necessarily know how good they are. We're very close to them. And whenever we look at a photo, we have all the other memories that go with it. We can remember what we were doing when we took the photo, the smells, the feel of the air on our face, the thoughts that were running through our head. We know all the photos that didn't work, and then we've selected this one, which makes it almost impossible to be objective. And there's very few places you can go on the internet and actually get some kind of real objective feedback on your images. So this really is an opportunity. This is a place where you can stick your photos in, and I'll do my best to kind of give you some genuine, hopefully tactful feedback on your photos. Right, okay, so with that in mind, let's go to the first photo. So what I'm going to talk about first, I'll start off with Robert. So Robert put in this photo, and well, in fact, he put in two. He put in this one, and he put in a closer in cropped version. This one seems to be more about the fields and the sky. This, by cropping in, makes it more about the water tower. But then he also sent me the original, which looks quite different again. So it gives you a sense of what he's already done with the editing. So let's flick back to this version, and I'll tell you what Robert said. So Robert said, "This is a scene I saw while driving in the country. I thought the water tower was somewhat interesting and snapped the shot because of the clouds. In editing, I flipped it horizontally and thought that the clouds created a spiral leading towards the water tower. The second is a closer crop that gives a different feel. Let me know how you see the photo and if you would have told a different story with it. I tried to tell a story of the clouds." In a separate email he sent, "I tried to tell a story of the clouds pointing or leading to the water tower. I was more interested in the clouds while taking the photo. Only during editing did I think of flipping the horizon. I used the rule of thirds to pin the tower. You will notice the colour editing needed due to the midday sun. I'm not 100% happy with it, but my creative sense is a little off and needs to be calibrated. Please review and let me know what you think would have made this a better photograph and story." So, what we've got then is beautiful day, it's midday, sun's coming sort of pretty much from overhead, bright blue skies, lots of puffy clouds, field of green, but if we go over to this, so this is the photo he took, and then but the colours feel more washed out. There isn't. So what he's done is and I can say sort of straight away, I kind of feel that the colours feel a bit overcooked with that. And I think that's easily done. What happens is we sort of start moving the slider, and then that looks okay. So we move the slider a bit more, and it's still looking, and you think, oh, that's interesting. You move it a bit more. And each time you're just comparing it to the last time. So you don't really realise necessarily how far you've come until you go back and look at the original. And whilst absolutely the original feels very flat and needs editing, I think by the time you get to this level, it does kind of feel a little bit overcooked. So one of the other things that was noticed, I think one or two people said in the comments during the week in the Facebook group, was that it does look a bit like the tower is leaning over slightly. And that could be slightly problematic, because if you straighten the tower, you are then going to unstraighten the horizon. Now, I don't know whether there was a wide angle lens being used on this, or whether it's just the kind of the way it goes, but it does look like this is sort of tilting slightly over. But then we've also got these telegraph poles running down the length here, but they all seem to be leaning the other way. So if you were to straighten these, it would make the tower look even more tilted. And if you were to straighten the tower, it would make the telegraph poles look even more tilted. And whichever one you straightened, the horizon would then not look right. So what I'll do, let's go to here, and let's just open this up in Photoshop. And I will show you a kind of a brief solution to this. And in essence, if you, I'll duplicate that layer. And if I go to this tool up in the top left here, now that would normally, I could grab a corner and change the shape and do all that kind of stuff. But if I hold down the control button, let's just pull this out of that, and then presumably the command button on a Mac, then this allows me to just grab one corner at a time and move it about. And what I can do is, if I pull this sideways, I essentially stretch the top part of the photo out the way. And you can see that starts to straighten up that. And then if I keep the control button held down, control or command, and then pull it out this way, I can start to straighten these. And by a little bit of, while it's sort of dragging the water tower and the pylons or telegraph poles, and you just kind of do this until you kind of feel like you've got them both straight where you want it. And now if I click, now if we zoom in, we've still got the straight horizon, but the water tower now looks straighter and the telegraph poles now look straighter. So that's a kind of handy way of, if something's not quite right with the composition of the horizontals and the verticals you've got, you can stretch the image a little bit in your editing to get, because sometimes that kind of happens because the lens you've got is automatically distorting the scene before you, especially if you're on a kind of wide angle big scene. So you're essentially correcting the scene. Another way you can do this, there is actually, if I go here, there are options for lens corrections as well. If I go to filter and click lens correction, I think it's here, and then one of these, custom, boom, 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 distortion. Oh, maybe I'm in the wrong. Oh no, vertical perspective and horizontal perspective. So if I take the horizontal perspective, see it starts twisting it like that. Let's go back to 0. Or I can do a vertical perspective where I can tilt it more in the way, or I can tilt it out. You see, if I move to the left, the top seems to come in more. If I move it to the right, the bottom comes closer to the screen. And you can see how that changes. So there is a little bit here whereby if I just start nudging this to the left a little bit until we get to a point where you go, aha, probably in this case about there, and then click OK. This has done the same kind of thing. It's now straightened the poles. So you can either do it using that one, or you can play around manually like I did just now, how you want to do that. So the next thing then is quite what you do. You flip the image because you actually wanted it sort of to move over to the right and to where the water tower was, rather than having the water tower and then moving over towards the poles. And that's fair enough. So let's just image rotate and flip that. The question is then what you do next with the editing. And I think it is partly down to, when you look at this photo, you've got the clouds. I think you're right. You've got too much sky at the top. So your first crop, you kind of pull down and you say, right, well, I want it, I don't need it much above there with the clouds. You then wanted to sort of pull it in just a little bit more, a little bit more cloud there, just kind of create a rule of, so that this is sitting on the third axis like that. I haven't done that. I just need to paint that back in. So we've got that. Now the question is really, I suppose the question is, what's the story about? Is the story about the clouds? Is it about the water tower? And depending on where you crop, I mean, obviously what you were looking for was that balance between it, and where you crop it changes the emphasis. So when it's here, we're much more about the clouds. There's the second crop that you did where you kind of came in much more down here, I think it was, this kind of thing. This then makes it much more about the water tower. The question is, though, with that, is there enough in the photo to keep your interest? If it's about the water tower more on its own, I think it's you kind of needed to be closer to the water tower. You either need to be further in, or I think probably this is more a kind of a calm scene. It's not the kind of big energetic photo. It's perhaps the kind of thing you would have as desktop wallpaper on your computer. It's just sort of a calming scene. There's hardly anything in the way of diagonals. It's verticals and horizontals, which keeps the energy down. Now, we've got this flatness, so what I'll do is, let's go into Camera Raw Filter. And if I click Auto, that sort of brightened it up a bit. We've sort of got a little bit more. You can see what's happened mostly is brought detail up out of the shadows, and it's taken some of those highlights down. And that certainly made it up the whites and down the blacks as well. But that's kind of helped a bit, but it's also given a little touch of vibrance. And actually what we do here, if I drag that off to the right, you can see it gets much, much bluer. The blues and yellows go much crazier. If I drag it down to the left, it becomes virtually black and white, because it's all kind of, well, if you put the greens in with the blues, it's kind of all that. So I think really what happened, now yours tends to be, it's like you drag the slider right over here. You know, if I go and take a look back at this version, it's very, very vivid. And that's, like I say, to my taste, it just feels overcooked. And that's like you sort of drag that sort of over there, and then maybe increase the clarity and the texture a bit. And it's kind of just feels a bit too overdone. And I think really, if you're wanting that, it's really a case of come back to where your original is, and then nudge it a bit, and you start going, oh, okay, that's bringing out the blue in the sky. That's quite nice. That's quite nice. That's kind of okay. Is that too far? I think that's maybe gone too far. And then if you just undo that, you can go back and you go, oh, okay, you know, and you just really need to kind of play a bit and just sort of try and find a happy medium. And I think for my taste, you're probably talking somewhere around about there. And that now gives you that kind of brighter day. But I mean, there's still places to play. But I think really, Robert, that's, you know, I think you're on the right track with your editing. I think where you were cropping it, the fact that you flip the water tower over to the right rather than being on the left, I think works better. It means we kind of come across, we follow these clouds in, and then we come to the water tower, rather than we see the water tower and then disappear off into the clouds. So I think that works. I just really think it's a case of being careful about how you do the editing. It's very easy to sort of get carried away without the scene actually being in front of you and going, oh, I want this brighter, I want it brighter, I want it brighter, I want it brighter. And it's very easy for us to, each time we look at it, we're comparing it only to the last time we saw it. And so it doesn't feel like such a big move to go a little bit more extreme, and then a little bit more extreme, and then a little bit more extreme, without realizing that actually compared to where we started, we've now gone so extreme that we've actually kind of lost something that was there in the original. That kind of feels like it probably applies to an awful lot more things than photos. You could probably start talking politics if you wanted to go down that route of how everything gets nudged further and further to the left or the right. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that route. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a few ideas, Robert, with that. So let's just minimize that, close that, and come back. All right, Robert said, well, it is Texas, good chance they are both leaning in opposite directions. yeah, probably back into politics again here as well. Cool. Oh yeah, it says no politics, yeah. Right, excellent. Okay, so hope you found that interesting, Robert. So next up, we're going to go to Quinton. Now, Quinton sent in this photo, and he said, critique please, I've been experimenting with black and white, a new challenge for me. Sometimes the black and white just enhances the lights and shadows in an image. Looking for overall critique on composition, crop, too much, too less, anything to help me do better as a photographer, thanks. So I asked him if he could send me the original, which he did. So this is the original photo of the bird in the field. And there's several things I like about this. One of the things is the backlight. You've got the sun the other side of the bird. That's really good. I'm constantly harping on about the notion of backlight, and what that's done is this: we've got this line of light on the edge of the neck and the back here, and that helps to separate out the bird from the background. What you've also got is the way you've got your depth of focus means we can see that the bird is in focus. There's a little bit of plant here is in focus, but it's out of focus in the foreground, out of focus in the background, and again that helps it to stand out against the background, and it stops it getting lost quite so much. But then what you've talked about is the idea of converting it to black and white. And to be honest, I mean, I played around with this a little bit, and I don't know that I was coming up with anything better than you've already got here. I think it's a nice conversion. You've managed to keep a nice separation so that the background is by and large lighter than the bird, so the bird stands out against the back. I'm going to just keep calling this the bird, by the way, because I'm not entirely sure what kind of bird it is. So for those ornithologists among you, put in the comments, tell me what bird it is, because I think I just kind of feel like I'm slightly embarrassing myself by constantly referring it to as to the bird, and I just have no idea about what kind it is. But I like your conversion to black and white. There's several different ways you could have done it, and in the end, I think this is kind of the one that works the best. The crop works well as well, because coming from where you were, which is here, there's obviously too much around. You want to crop in. What I like about the crop that you've got is you've also managed to kind of create diagonals pointing to the corners, and this is one of these things that I've often talked about as well. So the curve of the back of the bird comes down, and this line comes almost directly into the corner. Now at the moment that's obscured by the picture of me waving my hands and chatting to you, but okay, let's just show you here. You can see now that this is coming down into the corner, which is really good. And then likewise the line of the beak is taking you up into that upper corner, which is really good. There's something about the use of diagonals where when those diagonals point in towards directly into the corners, they become much more powerful than if they just miss the corners. I have talked about that before, but it's one worth remembering. So in a way, Quentin, I don't know that there's a lot I can tell you about this in terms of how to improve on the original photo that you had. I mean, I think if you go from this was the photo you had and you wanted to crop in and convert it to black and white, I think you've done it, and I think you've done it admirably well. So I think you should allow yourself a little smug moment with that. That's really good. Ways to improve, I think, don't come from what you do with this photo. Ways to improve then come about how you set about photographing birds in fields. This is more than a case of wildlife photography. It's kind of one of those things whereby a lot depends on what you're hoping to achieve. Now, I'm not a wildlife photographer, so if I happen to get a photo of a bird and it's not looking the other way or disappearing into the trees or out of focus, then the simple fact that I've managed to capture a picture of a bird makes me go, woohoo, this is great, because it's not my speciality and it's something I find extremely difficult. So that's enough for me. However, if I was trying to promote myself as a wildlife photographer or grow myself as a wildlife photographer, at that point, you need to go beyond just here's a picture of a bird. At that point, you need to have, it's about the story of the bird. This is where you sort of then progress your photography. You've done the cropping, you've done the conversion to black and white really well. The quality of the photo that you've taken is good. The next stage up is to try and do something with it, so it becomes a bird in an environment. And how do you get more of a sense of that? You need an interaction perhaps with something else. Is there an interaction with another bird? Is there an interaction with the plant? Is it eating? Is it trying to tear something off? Is it about to start flying? Is it just landing? It's then it's a little bit like take a photo of a post box, mailbox. you can get a really good photo of a mailbox. But then if you want the story of the mailbox, you need something else interacting with it. And I think that's really what it is a case with this, Quinton. I think the quality of the photo is fine, feel good about that. But I think if you're wanting to know where to go next, the next thing is what you do with the story of the bird. And that's really where it's going to make the most difference. So I hope that helps. I hope that you find that useful. Right, did anybody tell me what it was? Stacey reckons it looks like part of the heron family. Yeah, I did wonder that. Rosie, you not got any ideas? You're the wildlife photographer. Right, what else have we got? Stacey says she'll contact my friend. She knows all the species of bird. But by the time you've done that, Stacey, I'm sure we'd have moved on to the next picture, so don't worry too much. Jackie says, I also find wildlife photography needs a lot of patience and perseverance. And it does, and we've talked about this before. I think Rosie once talked about sitting for 6 hours inside a garden shed to try and get a particular photo. I've never really had the patience for it. I have huge respect and admiration for people who can do the whole wildlife photography thing. Part of the reason I do portraiture is so that I can interact with the person that I'm photographing, and if things aren't working the way I want, we can change them. I can direct them to move their head, to shift their body, to tilt their, to drop their shoulder. I can move the lights around, all these kind of things, because if things aren't working for me straight away, I need to feel like I'm problem solving and I can do something about it. Whereas wildlife photography, by and large, requires either just being really luckily in the right place at the right time, which doesn't happen very often, or staking out and sitting in a place and waiting for the right time and to come to you. So yeah, it's a very different kind of way of doing photography. And if you've got a mind for doing that, then it's you start to then think, how do I do that? And a lot of wildlife photographers will set themselves up in particular places to ensure that they get the interaction that they want. So if you want to see the bird, the osprey, coming down and grabbing the fish out of the water, you need to set yourself up in a place where ospreys do that. And then you need to set yourself up at a time of year when they're likely to do that, and to be in a hide where you can get the best shot but you're not going to disturb it. So there's all these kind of different things that go on. So anyway, best of luck with that, Quinton, and hope you found that useful. Right, okay, next bit then. Let's move on to Roy. And Roy sent in this one and said, Hi Kim, this is one of the many images I made near the War Horse Memorial in Featherstone near Wakefield, West Yorkshire. The advice I'm looking for is how to make the wire figures, particularly the head and shoulders of the front soldier, stand out more from the background. And then there was another image he put in, which was a photograph of the plaque, which sort of tells you more about what the memorial is there for. And then he also then put in a black and white photo, which he took from the other side, which actually shows the soldiers and the horse much more quickly. And I must admit here, actually, let's just pull that out so that my head isn't obscuring the whole thing, and enlarging that a little bit so you can see here, getting the people in on the left. So it is one of those things that what you're up against when you've got wire figures is that you are seeing through them. One quick thing about this photo, by the way, I did notice, is there seems to be a strong line coming down here, which indicates to me that you selected an area to darken or, to edit, but you missed a bit. So worth checking out these things when you're doing the editing. However, I like your conversion to black and white here, and I think this angle is really doing much more of what you wanted it to do, Roy. In a way, you've kind of answered your own question with this. Part of the problem you have with the wire figure is the background shows through it. And if the background happens to be busy, then it's going to interfere with the actual thing that you're trying to photograph. So how do you get around that? Now, one of the ways you can get around it is like what you've done here, you take it so that you've got, say, the sky behind you, or in this case, when you've got the greenery, the way you convert it to black and white has meant that the greenery is quite light, whereas the wire is quite dark. And that means we have a nice bit of dark against light, and therefore that shows up the wire really well. Likewise here, we've got all that sense of the patterning and the wire frame, because it doesn't actually have anything too busy against it to interfere. Where the tree comes in at the background, that starts to create a little bit more interference, but by this time we've got strong enough lines here to be able to get away with it. But certainly here we notice much more that the soldiers stand out better in black and white against this paler background. When we go here, where you've got it in colour, this black line around the soldiers just doesn't work anything like quite as well. We've got to zoom in and know what we're looking for to actually make sense of it. And the red poppies on there, while very poignant, actually kind of acts almost as a distraction, because your eye gets taken straight to the red point. So we notice, remember when we were talking about the red challenge a couple of weeks ago, your eye gets drawn straight into the red. So when you see this, we see the big dominant horse, we notice the red wreaths around the feet, we notice the red poppies here, we notice the red bench in the background. And these things are kind of drawing our eye, which is drawing our eye away from the much more subtle nature of the wire frame. So ways around this, there's the black and white thing, which you've already done, which I think you do well. Other ways around this are, I think, you either then go for a much wider aperture and create a narrow depth of field. And then that way what you do is you can then focus on, say, the front one, so that he would be in focus, but it would then go much more out of focus past that. And so the background would sort of end up much more blurred. Not necessarily that easy to do if you're standing this far back. Another option, I would say, would be to, if you kind of stood in closer and then used this one to frame the other one. So you would move round to your left somewhat, stand in between. Don't try and get the whole of this soldier in. Maybe try and get the whole of the other soldier. Again, maybe you might do this from the other side. But because in the background here, there's a lot of trees and a lot of busyness, whereas there's less busyness from the other side that you took the photo from. But if you sort of used one to frame the other, and you've got enough of the front one to be able to tell what it is, you would see through it and have a much better sense of the second one. And I think playing around with that is quite an interesting one. It's frames within frames, but also using the background to help give you sense of what's happening in the foreground as well. It's a little bit like, actually, this is, in some ways you're going to say it's nothing like. I didn't think about this earlier, so I don't have the photo at the ready. So if you'll bear with me one moment, I will just have to quickly go up and find the photo I'm looking for. So what I'm trying to do here, what I want to do here is talk about how sometimes you can't always get what you want into the front of the frame, but by having a similar thing behind it, it actually, here we go. Let's use that one. This is one where I did. So what we've got here, this picture here is of blues guitarist and singer Sean Taylor, who I've done various shoots with in the past. I can't remember if we've talked about him or not. However, what I wanted to do was take a photo of him standing under a lamppost, and he's leaning up against the lamppost. But the thing is the lamppost is much, much taller than him. And if I tried to get the shot of him and the lamppost in at the same time, he would have been so small, you wouldn't have really got that same kind of moody look on the way the light was falling on his face. He would have just seemed too small compared to the height of the lamppost. So what I did was I angled it so I got the lamppost behind him into shot. So that lamppost over here isn't the one that's lighting him. The one that's lighting him is the one he's standing directly under. But because you can see the lamppost in the back, it just makes you more aware that he's standing under a lamppost. So you get that sense of him standing under the lamppost, even though you can't see the lamppost itself. Does that make sense? Am I getting too obscure with my analogies? So if we come back to here, what I was going to talk about is sort of kind of similar. That what you do is you kind of come in closer here. You don't try and get the whole of this one in, but you allow enough of it in, and then you shoot through it to get the one behind it. Or probably better still to do that from your black and white one where you've got a slightly less busy background, in which case you would use this one as the one in the foreground and shoot through it to get the whole of this one behind it. And you use the one in front as a frame and the one behind and maybe slightly out of focus, and you try, and then that way you can go for a narrower depth of focus and sort of play around where you're just concentrating on the wire figures. The wire figures are really difficult to try and photograph because you can see through and the background is going to get in the way. So how do you get the background out of the way? You either have to defocus it by focusing on something in the foreground so the rest back goes blurry, or you have to have it lighter or darker so against something so that it stands out. And that's why it stands out better here in your black and white conversion than it does the other way around in the colour version. So I've kind of talked around the subject. I hope that's maybe giving you some ideas to play with, Roy. Okay, so thanks for sending those images in. It's kind of fun to try and work out how you would actually solve that problem. Okay, what else have we got here? So Naria says she thinks the black and white looks so much better. And Jackie says, I also noticed the soldiers more with the black and white image. Naria also says the pole in the background makes the horse look like a unicorn. And Roy says, I removed that pole in a later edit. Stacey thinks it's a beautiful wire horse. Cool. Okay, right. So, last one we're going to move on to this evening, and then I will tell you about what I'm planning to do in, well, next week I've only got half an idea, but in 2 weeks' time is Spring Fling. So hang around for the end because I want to tell you about what I'm going to be doing for the Spring Fling edition in 2 weeks. But meantime, what we're now going to move on to is VG. Roy's just said is this is quite near to me, Kim, so I'll try out your ideas. Oh, that's good. Okay, great. I look forward to seeing how you get on with that then, Roy. Okay, so VG said, it's been more than a month since I stepped out of my house. It's maddening and I feel cooped up. Got to bear in mind that VG is in southern India, and you know, anybody who's been watching certainly the British news, I don't know what the news is like in South Africa or America, but COVID's kind of got really quite out of control in India, and so there's a serious lockdown at the moment. So VG's been getting a little bit kind of cabin fever, I think. He says he's missing everyday delights of looking at the beach. That's also really frustrating. Just VG lives 500 yards away from the beach, and she can't get there because of the lockdown. You're not supposed to leave your house unless it's, for very specific reasons. You can't just go for a stroll. And I can only imagine just how frustrating that must be. So she's missing looking at the beach, taking a drive, chatting with my friend, even under the COVID protocols. It's been particularly depressing as there were some deaths in a nearby circle and we were not able to say our farewells. And that's just heartbreaking, that really is. Past couple of weeks, I did not even touch my camera, let alone take photographs. On Sunday, I thought I would try and divert myself, otherwise I'd go mad. So I tried creating a scene with meagre resources I had at home. No wood this time, and just shot some photos. I had to make some things, even a tiny red Omnivan, a funny looking one at that. And so let's just show you the. I'll close that, open that. Get rid of that, and so let's just show you VG's photo. So VG was basically created this little scene. Technically the zebra crossing would be near signals, not near households, but that's just for spicing up the tar road. I don't think anybody's going to criticise you for putting a zebra crossing in the wrong place on your little model there. I think this is brilliant. I think there is just so much fun and creativity gone into this VG. If she's been playing around with movement. Here's another angle. And here's the setup. And I love this. And thank you for sending in the setup, VG. It just really gives us a real sense of what's going on. So here's the model. Here's the camera sitting on a tripod. Got the flash on top of the camera. A lot of fun. So VG goes on to say, so what I would like to know, there are several bright elements here, and I wanted to draw attention to the red wagon. Am I successful? Or do you feel the eyes are getting pulled off in different directions? I visualised something and I tried to get it and was able to get about 50% success. Yes, the creations are pretty rugged and not perfect. With a slow shutter speed, tried to move the car, create some eerie, ghostly effect to give a sense of movement as well. So that was, yeah, so we can see here, so that's the setup VG Scott. There's one of the photos. Here she's been doing slow shutter speed, creating a sense of movement, which I think is brilliant. Here's the, the bright coloured red is probably the unedited version and a slightly enriched edited version. And so what your original thing is, what you ask is, you wanted to draw attention to the red wagon. Are you successful? And the simple fact is, yes. While there are other bright colours, we've got bright yellow, we've got bright blue. It's a really nice, bright, colourful picture. Reminds me a lot of a kind of children's animation. I don't know what programs get exported, but there's a lot of BBC children's programs, things like Postman Pat or Fireman Sam, and Bob the Builder, and they are bright 3D animations full of primary colours, and this reminds me a lot of that. It's got that same kind of feel to it. It puts a smile on the face, it really does. I think my grandson Alfie would love these kind of photos. You wanted the attention on the red van, and you've got the attention on the red van because it's red. This goes back to everything we talked about for the red challenge a couple of weeks ago, which is red is the dominant colour to draw the eye. We can have almost any other colour in a photograph, and the red bit will be the bit that will stand out. And so by making it a red van, if you made that a green van, say, or a yellow van, if it had been a yellow or blue van, it could have very easily then got lost against the background. Any other, if it had been grey or, as I say, green or dark blue or something like that, I just don't think it would have grabbed the attention in the same way. So the fact that you've got the red means it is grabbing the attention. So that's great. I think though, VG, now, okay, sorry, several things leaping into head at the same time here. First of all, I think the fact that you're making models to photograph is just absolutely brilliant. I truly love it. I think it's so creative, at the point where we are stuck indoors in lockdown. We can't go out and take photos. To actually make something to photograph your own it's still life, but it's not just gathering objects. You've gone the next stage up, which is to actually physically create something. And I think that's brilliant. I think it's brilliant for creativity, probably brilliant for your mental health as well, to just be able to kind of absorb yourself in making something. Because while you're there sort of working out where's this matchstick going to go, how am I going to lay out this bit of black, whatever, you're then thinking about that, and you're not thinking about the 10 million other things that would normally be worrying you. What I would say is, if you're going to be making models, the next thing to really think about is the lighting. Now, what you've got here is you've got the flash sitting on the camera. One of the things we've talked about before is the fact that, unfortunately, when the light comes from exactly the same direction as the lens, so when the flash is on top of the camera, it creates probably the least interesting kind of light. It becomes much more interesting with light if you can have the light coming from the side or even from behind. Now, understand the next problem that you've got is you don't have triggers which will allow you to create an off-camera flash. So the other way round this is to bounce the light. And this is where you can also get really quite creative, VG. You've got the brain for it, you've got the mind for it, you've got the creativity for it. I think it's just a case of getting in there and playing with it, coming in with a sort of slightly engineer's head And some of you out there, I know some of you who watch this actually do veer more onto the kind of engineering kind of side of mind. So it's a place to start having fun, to start thinking about. If you had the flash only either the one that's already existing on your camera or one that you've bought, but you can only trigger it from the camera, how could you get the light to come from different angles? And one of the things you can do, because you can swivel the top of this flash, you can bounce the light. Now, if you turn it just partially, there will still be some overspill. But you can block that. You can block the overspill with just a piece of card stuck on the side with a bit of tack onto the side of the flash. So if I should have had one of these earlier. So let's just show you. So we've got a flash here. It's then sitting on top of your camera. We can point it in the direction we want, turn it to the side, that way, even turn it backwards to bounce light off something else. Now the fact that you can bounce it gives you option. Now if you consider, for example, then let's say this is the way I've got, if you were the object and I'm pointing this at you, wherever you can see a bit of white here, that's where light's going to go. Now if I turn it this way, I might be able to bounce the light off that way, but still some of it is going to end up coming towards the thing. So at that point, all I really need is literally a piece of card or a piece of paper, which I stick to the side of it. And then that stops any overspill going off in the direction I don't want it. I'll stick it there. So you get that idea. So you can, a little bit of card stuck on the side, you can create cones, you can create... Now the other thing to then do is what you do is you place either a reflector or a mirror off to one side. So if you had a mirror to the... So if we flip back to here, if say you had a mirror over on to the right, just outside of the edge of that photo, and you turned the top of the flash so it pointed towards the mirror, and then you put a little bit of card on the side of the flash so that it didn't spill back over onto your scene. Then when you went click, the light would bounce into the mirror and then come back onto the scene, and it would be lit from a different angle. Now, for all the fact that I'm saying this out loud, I thought this was all theoretical. I thought I've not actually tried doing this myself. So just this afternoon, and this is very basic, I just wanted to see whether that would work. And I got the little mannequin that's sitting over myself, and I put the camera on the ground, put the flash on top of the camera, and took a shot against a couple of cardboard boxes. So there we have, and that's a forward light. So I thought, well, what happens then if I stick a mirror and do exactly what I've just told you? I have a mirror to the right, I point the flash towards the mirror, and then put up a little bit of card to stop the overspill. And I ended up with that. So the flash is still on top of the camera, but I've got it pointing off, and I've managed to create a side light. Now, I will just say I had to increase the power because reflected light isn't as strong as original light. So on my original settings, I had the camera set at something like, the flash set at something like 1/8 power. When I turned it, I put it up to 1/4 power, or it might have even been 1/2 power, in order to get more light to bounce and come back. But you can see there's a considerable difference between being lit from the front and lit from the side. And it's much, much more atmospheric. And just to show you, this is an appalling photo, but it does give you a sense. This is, I took this with my phone just to show you that I'm not making all this up. So I've got my camera. You can actually see the figure, that photo that I just showed you, being lit from the side. It's got it pointing, sitting on the floor, pointing at the mannequin, and here we've got the mirror, and the light is going into the mirror. Now, if you can see the object in the mirror from the line of the flash will be hitting the mirror and lining it up. So you have to move the mirror about backwards and forwards a bit to make sure that you can see the object you want lit. But you get the principle. It's not actually that complicated. It's a lot of messing about, but the principle of it isn't that complicated. If you know about the fact that light bounces off mirrors, then it's as straightforward as that. And because I didn't want to get the overspill, I've just got a piece of doubled over paper or thick paper stuck to the side of the flash with a little bit of tack. And that then has allowed me to photograph this and create that instead of that. So I hope that gives you some ideas, VG. I think making the models is a brilliant thing to do, fantastic idea. I think your next thing to have fun with is how to light them. And you can have so much fun with the lighting, trying to get light bouncing about. So you can have it bouncing off mirrors. Could you do other things? Could you have a mirror there, another mirror over there? Could you angle bits of, I mean, before now I have even had bits of tin foil, aluminium foil or baking part, not baking, but you know what I mean, the tin foil anyway, to acting like a mirror to sort of create little bits of, so could you create multiple light scenes off the one flash? It's a kind of intriguing possibility. Play, really play. If you've got the model, start now thinking how you can adjust it to. Now, the other thing the problem you might have is if you are looking in the back of the camera because you've got it on live view, if you reduce your ISO setting to 100 and all the rest of it, so it's just being lit by the flash, you suddenly find you can't see in the back. So it might be a case of just adjust your ISO to auto while you're doing the setup so you can see where everything goes. And then before you go click, put your ISO back to 100 and then go click. And then that way you will have the controlled light that you want rather than it being lit from above. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask me again, and we can talk about it more in depth. But I hope that helps. So a lot of fun there. Thank you very much for sending in those images. Thank you for sending the behind the scene images as well, because that's really what sort of started triggering me with the idea of bouncing the flash. Stacey says she did it once, putting tin foil on cardboard. Jackie says I've used homemade reflectors with tin foil as well. So yeah, that's good. Okay, so what else have we got? There's quite a few comments here. Jackie said she's also heard about India down in South Africa. Stacey likes the way your mind went into creative mode. Nuria says my little one does this with her Lego. Lego's another one. If or some of the kids' toys, if you've got little action figures and things like that as well. In fact, there's a whole sort of subgenre of still life though, where people do incredible setups with Lego and create these dramatic scenes, get very, very cinematic with. In fact, I saw one recently. A couple of little Star Wars Lego figures sitting inside a metal grater, like a carrot grater, cheese grater, square one. They were sitting inside, but red lights had been put in, and it was reflecting on the inside. It was really incredibly creative. So you can create little scenes, and I think, as well as being creative and a bit of fun and passing the time and taking your head away from whatever else happens to be bothering you, I think it's a really, really good way of practicing composition, lighting, and narrative and story. What story are you trying to tell? How can we create it? And it doesn't matter if it's very obvious little handmade models. All the rules apply. The composition is still going to apply. The lighting is still going to apply. So the more you can practice on these things, the better. You'll end up with some interesting, fun little photos anyway. But then the amount of knowledge you gain from it means that when you are able to then leave the house, when you are then able to sort of start creating scenes, whether it's narrative scenes like I do, or you're doing portraits, you then have a much better understanding of lighting and how to manipulate the light. What else have we got? Jackie loves the fact that we can see the behind the scenes. Sandra says, fantastic homemade set, VG. Take care until the situation with the pandemic improves. Jackie says, keep busy. It's healthy to keep busy during lockdown. Maggie says she loves your creativity. VG says, thanks, Kim. Yes, I forgot to bounce a light. Just realised I turned the flash facing the roof. Yes, you can do that. You can point it up and bounce it. And that gives you a soft all-round light, but you then don't get the sort of dramatic shadows, which are always more interesting if you bounce it off other surfaces. Vijay says loves the side lighting, and we'll try again this weekend. Stacey says, what is the mirror size and does it matter? Not really. Play. I mean, again, you know, the bigger the mirror, the more reflection options you maybe have, but sometimes you might want to narrow the mirror to just create a streak of light, in which case you might have a larger mirror and then put bits of black paper or bits of paper or something over the set and create just a restricted area. So yeah, homemade reflectors with tinfoil, mirrors, even a strong piece of white card can act as a reflector. The more mirror-like the surface, the more light is going to come across. If you've got something just like a piece of white card, it won't reflect the light as much, so you would have to up the power of the flash. But again, you just keep playing and experimenting. So I hope that helps. Thanks very much for sending those in, VG. I love the creativity. Right, okay, so that's pretty much us in terms of the pictures. Now, don't go rushing off just yet. I did want to tell you about Spring Fling. So Spring Fling is, I think I've talked about this before, it's an event that happens in southwest Scotland every year, last weekend in May. And usually what happens is there's anything from 60 to 100 artists will open up their studios for people to go and visit. However, lockdown last year meant that, of course, people couldn't open their studios to visit, and we ended up having an online Spring Fling in the autumn because it took, you know, nobody was quite sure what was happening, and by the autumn they managed to sort of arrange something to do online. We're now back to Spring Fling proper, as in end of May, except for the fact that we are still in lockdown and it's still very limited, so most studios have not opened. But one of the things, so there's more online stuff going on, and in 2 weeks' time I'm going to be doing a Spring Fling special with this podcast. And what I started thinking about, and so I will talk again about this next week, what I'm doing now is planting the seeds for you to go away and have a think about, is I thought what I would do is I would take the podcast as though, what would happen if you visited me in my studio? If I opened up the studio and you were to come by, what questions would you want to ask? If you had the chance to visit me in my studio, what would you want to know? And that's what I'm going to be putting out there. We'll get past next week's podcast first. Still not totally sure on what I might do something about garden flowers. I've got a macro lens and I've been having fun with dandelion seed heads, so it's possible I might talk about that unless something else occurs to me. But certainly in 2 weeks there's going to be this idea of what would you want to ask the photographer? If you made the trip out to see me in my studio and you're in there and there's other people coming in and out and you've got a chance to look around at some photos and you've got a chance to chat to the photographer, what would you want to ask? So I'm going to have that kind of question session. So start having a think about that, make a couple of notes, and then next week, after next week's podcast, I'll set up the event page and I'll leave a place for people to stick their questions in so you can start thinking about that. Right, that's pretty much it. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you found it useful, if you would like to contribute to and towards the podcasts and help support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do it. Beyond that, thank you to everybody who's taken the time to comment, send in photos, and I will see you all next. Was there any last comments? No, just last. All right, Stacey's saying, making my plans to visit. Right, thank you very much. I will see you all next Tuesday, and hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Cheerio.